We're in the information age, but really what that means, it's oversaturated, like podcasts and the rap scene. It's confusing, whether you go on live or you zoom in. You can't be on the same page if you don't know what the room thinks, and the room thinks too many words, and every word is personal, and when it's in type, it's even worse. You misunderstood? That's just how it works, and I'm a hypocrite, just like the rest of the earth. Welcome to the Museum of Dead Words. I'm your tour guide dialect, along with Pamela Capalad, Kristen Crouch, and Andrew J. Scoville. We spent the past few years pouring through conversations online to find words that ruin conversations, that kill discourse. We dubbed these words dead and have been infiltrating art galleries, co-working spaces, cafes, even Steve TV to share how these words died and why that matters. In the online series, we'll be spending a week with each word. The Bluprints in progress on Tuesday, that's today, where we get deep into how a word dies. And on Thursdays, we'll have the main event with a collaboration with artists from around the world to share their experiences with how these words die and why it matters. If you know a word or phrase that have died or may be in danger of dying, please share in the chat, add to the dead word bucket on museumofdeadwords.com, or even DM me, email me, reach out to me. I'm findable. A little about the museum. We opened when your mouths did, and thanks to the generous contributions of millions of donors like you, we've been able to identify and catalog a growing list of words in the English language that have fallen into disuse. You know, in this language, it's often hard to tell when a word has stopped working. Being English, these words tend to colonize conversations and then just sit there, festering, letting tone and context do all the work. Sometimes these words die, and it takes generations for anybody to notice. This is when words are dangerous, as words only become weapons when they cease to function as tools, and their wits get sharper in direct proportion to the dulling of their meaning. For example, calling someone a hater is as indecipherable as it is incisive. You can often find these words propped up by glossaries or dictionaries. You know, dictionaries are the worst culprit. Dictionaries were never meant to hold words. They're just a snapshot of how one was feeling at the time. We don't know that, so we take these facsimiles, these zombie words, and we allow them to infect our advice and our arguments. The first word in the museum is hypocrite. It's a noun. It was born around circa 1200 and died in 1639. It's from the Old French hypocrite, false pretender to a virtue or a religion. Remember the religion part. We're going to come back to that. It's a sin. It also comes from the Greek Hippocrates, a stage actor, pretender, dissembler. Y'all may know many times when people will call a hypocrite or an actor somebody a liar in raps. I've got a quote from Kanye West where he said, "Nothing worse than a hypocrite. Change, he ain't really different." And other things from Extentacion where he said, "I'm not self-aware, I'm misled. I'm a hypocrite like the rest." Now, when we talk about these words, we have to talk about how they live in the specific forms where they live in. So hypocrite, it's cool. Hypocritical is a little bit different, but we can't talk about being a hypocrite without talking about the idea of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, also around circa 1200, is known as the sin of pretending to virtue or goodness. The sin. It comes from religion, but the whole point of a hypocrite is it's about safety. The reason this word was coined is so that we can look out for the people in our community and create safety. See, the word hypocrite, it was created mostly to ensure safety in a community, right? So it's here to reveal the wolf in the sheep's clothing. As soon as the wolves could do so, they knew about this, so they stretched the definition. They moved the goalposts during questions and inquisitions. Now all we know is a hypocrite is somebody we can't trust. And that's dangerous because when we don't trust anybody, we don't have a community. And that's when wolves strike. You see, I have a quote from 1938, Benjamin F. Martin, where he said that, it's from a book called France in 1938. It was written in 2005. Hypocrisy is the art of affecting qualities for the purpose of pretending to an undeserved virtue. We're going to talk about deserve in a couple of weeks. Because individuals and institutions and societies most often live down to the suspicions about them, hypocrisy and its accompanying equivocations underpin the conduct of life. Imagine how frightful truth unvarnished would be. Wait a second. So what they're saying is individuals, institutions, societies live down to expectations, meaning that if we have a good idea about ourselves or something that we think that we believe in, we probably don't, whether we're an individual, whether we're an institution, or a society. So that means like everybody's a hypocrite, right? So if everybody's a hypocrite, what do we got to be afraid of? How did we even get here? Well, first of all, what do we have to be afraid of? There's this nefarious idea that everyone is worse than they appear to be and that they may strike at any time. There's this idea that, propagated by the wolves, that every sheep is a potential wolf. This is often equivocation for people to do harm. And we'll see this as we get into later words where we talk more about this. But it's basically like, I'm going to hurt somebody before they hurt me, because that's how people do it. And it's not only about physical danger that we put people in. Sometimes it's about your worth to the community. It's about sellouts. When it's not about safety, calling out the hypocrites is a matter of loyalty. Are you actually down? And that's where it gets really messy. And this is where hypocrite begins to die. People start taking the ideals of a community of one and putting it on themselves. It's the same folks that you'll hear say the same people, the same people who are often not the same people. You'll see folks say Twitter's a cesspool. I don't want to hear what any of those folks have to say, because even though they may be wrong one day, like my song likes to say, a broken clock is right at least twice a day. How did all this go down, and how is this proven? And how is it brought to public light? One of the ways that this happened, the main way actually, is a little phrase, a Latin phrase called tu quoque. It's Latin for you also. And it posits that an appeal to hypocrisy is an informal fallacy that intends to discredit the opponent's argument by asserting the opponent's failure to act consistently in accordance with conclusions. In other words, folks ain't consistent. This was proven in a stage play by John Cook. It was called The City Galleon, but also known as Greetings to Quoque. In Greetings to Quoque, they tell this story of a cat. It's a little on the nose. His name is Spendall. And as his name says, he spends all his money, he wastes it, and is reduced to poverty and prison. And there's another character in it who goes and bounces back and forth from poverty and having money and having power and losing power. Because the one thing about hypocrite that, as I'm talking about, you're finding is there is a lot of power and money involved in the stuff that we're saying. And in this story, there's another character named Bubble. And Bubble starts out in poverty, but unlike Spendall, Bubble's like, I'm going to hold it down. It's all good. And good things happen to me. I'm going to stay loyal to my people. And he stays loyal to a character named Stain. Everybody's on the nose. I love this book. To the character named Stain. And Stain is a stain on Bubble's life. Makes things terrible. Always rough on him. Oh, and it's also his boss. His boss that holds him down. His boss falls into debt. And after he falls into debt through hook, crook, happenstance, and coincidence, Bubble ends up with that money. Bubble, to this entire time, remains loyal to Stain, even as the two of them together fall back into misfortune. And that's the main point of this problem with the word hypocrite. It's not just about safety. It's not just about loyalty. It's about change. When we can posit that a hypocrite is everyone, if that hypocrites are all of us, then that means hypocrites aren't just lay people. They're not just folks with bad sports takes. They're teachers, they're doctors, they're politicians, they're leaders. And when we're able to say that our leaders don't believe in the ideals that they say they believe in, then we don't have to do anything about it. And then if we don't have to do anything about it, then change doesn't have to happen. This is how we're able to stifle change. When you hear people say, well, I want to see some regulation in this industry. People say, well, you still participate in this industry. People say something as simple as, I read The Nib. It was a great cartoon where they had, it was a webcomic called The Nib, where there was a guy saying cars should have seatbelts. And the response is, well, but you still drive a car, even though they don't have seatbelts. You're not boycotting that. You're a hypocrite. A lot of times people are labeled with the term hypocrite because they have to move through a society that hates and fears them. We may be the X-Men in it, but as long as we're men, we're still held and bound by all the things that they do to them. The ways where change is stifled and the ways that we hold down our teachers, our community leaders, our politicians, you can see that throughout history, and you can see it today. Like we always talk about on Brunch and Budget, if you hear the stuff, we talk about the unbroken line of how things have been going through oppression. Dr. King in the 60s was called a communist for trying to look out for his community. And today, when people are saying that we need healthcare, they're called socialists, and they often mean the same thing. I want to take you to a personal note. Now, 1639, I said, was the year that it died. That's basically when the fallout from Greens to Cokeway really hit everything. And I wanted to, do a little fumbling, Googling, Scoogling, see what I could do. And I Googled 1619 and hypocrite, and I came upon not a year, but a statute. This was in Texas, and it was Initiative 1619, I'm messing up what I'm saying, 1639. And in Initiative 1639, it was a gun, it was for gun legislation in Washington. And it was something that was going to be on the ballot. And I found this article written by a gun owner. And they said, last week I was walking into Target when I saw a man asking for signatures for 1639, a new proposed gun legislation in Washington state. I stopped to sign my name. As I saw that, a young man who was next to me walked up and said, "You want to see my gun?" My children were just a couple of feet away. I was enraged and terrified, and I was reminded that the issue of gun control is not as black and white as many seem to think. What this man didn't know is I, too, am a gun owner. Albeit by default, my husband owns multiple guns, including a handgun and a few rifles passed down from grandfather that are locked up in a secure house in our safe. Our children don't have access to it, and they don't even know they're there. While I'm a strong supporter of gun control, I have no problem having guns in the house. The reason why is the same reason I support 1639. I believe in responsible gun ownership. The intellectual reason, farther than the whole safety, loyalty thing, about why we talk about the word hypocrite and why it's important to understand the ways that it's been killed, is that when we are in discourse and we label every single inconsistency a reason to not listen, we run out of people to talk to. There's always a deeper and better point than asking someone if they're a hypocrite or accusing someone of being a hypocrite. Are they wrong? Did they change? Did they grow? Were they hangry? I know when I'm hangry, when I'm feeling like I need to eat, I act way different than I do in other times. When we chart the growth and the path of the word hypocrite, it died around 1639 and was kept it's sort of a bit alive in zombie form throughout the 1740s before it finally came to an end right around 1750. It started to come back again, and you can see through the use of it in literature, it was beginning to be used again in the beginning of the 20th century when we had a lot of social upheaval and a lot of people who were worried about war that was impending. Everybody was looking for the hypocrite. Everybody was looking for the secret Nazi. Everyone was looking for the secret communist. Those things died down again a little bit after the war. And by the war, I mean both of the wars, because a lot of folks think that they're just the same war. Funny enough, in the information age, the place that we've gotten to today, you see a spike in the use of the word hypocrite from 2001, moving throughout our time and only continuing to increase and grow. The reason behind that is that we have more access to information than ever. We have more ability to mobilize, organize, make change, and grow. And that means the people who are afraid of the use of the term hypocrite, the wolves that lie within the sheep's clothing, have more need to stifle that free speech. The way that we do that is making us afraid of each other. The way that we do that is through ruining language. And when I bring this up, a lot of folks are like, well, you know what? I don't really worry about words like that because I'm not concerned with somebody being a hypocrite. I'm concerned with how language moves and grows today. So before we go, I want to talk about a word today that is being similarly misused. And it came out not too long ago, but has already been beaten to a point where it's not even worth it to use anymore. And that's Karen. Karen was a very interesting word. It came out for a similar reason to hypocrite, to show off the people who seemed to be in sheep's clothing, but were actually wolves, people who would cause harm against another people. In this particular case, for those who don't know, this is about white women who would call the police on people of color in an effort to bring physical violence towards them for some annoyance or other thing that they didn't like, some reason they disagreed with them, reason they had a problem with them. Almost immediately, within like a month, this word started getting diluted. And it stopped being about a white woman who was using their privilege to cause violence. And then it seemed to be about any woman who used her voice. Now, sexism and racism both are at play, and those are both words that we're going to be talking about in the museum, but we're not talking about them today. The thing about that with Karen is it's two things. One, it's how hatred of women often supersedes the way that we feel about everything. And I say our collective hatred. I think women are pretty great. And it's also about the life cycle of Black slang. Karen was a term that was created and popularized by Black women when they were talking about the problems that are going in society. And the problem with that is that Black slang has a very short life cycle. I talk about it in another project that I'm doing with Fool's Fury folks. If you see the Fool's Fury, I can't even say it, alliteration. The Fool's Fury Festival, we're going to be talking more about that. But the life cycle of Black slang goes in 5 simple steps. The first step, it's a dangerous word that's cool and everybody wants to use it, but they don't know what to do with it. You saw people talking about so-and-so Karen was doing this, and it was a viral picture that was going all around, and people were really interested in using it because they were sharing ways that things were violent and dangerous. After that, that's when white folks start to get a hold of it. And I like to say that a spicy white person, I didn't come up with that term, but spicy white people start to get a hold of the word. And when they get a hold of the word, well, then they make it cool, but also accessible. The skin tone allows for a lot of that. Me being mixed, I've noticed that I've been allowed to be spicier than other people because that's the way that it goes. The third stage of what happens with the Black slang is that once it starts being spoken about by a spicy white and starts being cool and we all start using it, then it starts to get played out, overused, and you hear people using the term derisively. That's when Karen became anybody who was talking out the side of the neck or anybody who was saying things that people didn't like or people didn't respect. That's when the sexism started to creep in. And the last stage is when you see Good Morning America and sitcom moms and all the institutions using it. That's where the money gets into it, and that's where it's completely obliterated. Funny enough, with the word Karen, the original sexist hatred of women term actually is the first time it was used in popular media. If you look at people who are trying to write down what are the definitions of Karen and how did it start and where did it come from, some people were saying that Jay Farrow came up with it because he had an earlier stand-up where he talked about that kind of thing and talked about Karen being someone who was racist and had power in her racism. But the actual first time the term was used in popular media was comedy's bane of existence, Dane Cook. Dane Cook in 2005 was saying Karen was a woman they didn't like. And even though he didn't coin the phrase in the meaning that was useful to society, that meaning of his, that kernel, became the way that it died and was ruined for everybody. I want to thank you guys for listening to today's Blueprints in Progress. We're going to be going to next Thursday for the main event with Clara Aiden from Lagos, Nigeria, where she's going to share her amazing visual art that's going to be coinciding with the work that I've been doing. And we're going to finish you guys off with the last song, well, the song that we did for the show. It's called Broken Clock Theory because it's going to be okay. A broken clock is right at least twice a day. And my name is Dialect. I'm here with the Museum of Dead Words. Thank you so much for listening to the things that we're saying, and we'll check you next time. Peace. Yo, I'm wrong a lot. That's not a disclaimer. Just